So I'm going to show you guys how to get this pattern out of the computer. We have everything represented here from the last two videos that I went through showing how to make this pattern. We have all the pieces, but we need to prepare this ready for sewing. So the first thing I'm going to look at is the sleeve. And when we made the sleeve pattern, I put this notch line on the front to indicate that this is the front and this is the back. I'm just going to delete this line and then explain what we want to do here. So I'm going to press Shift and Z on the keyboard to turn on the measurement visibility. And then if I look at my front sleeve, I'm in relation to my front armhole. I'm just going to rotate it, line it up here. So when we sew this together, it will go something like this. This point will be the underarm and this point will go into the shoulder, and remember our shoulder line is actually a little bit adjusted, so there's some more shoulder on the back panel here. The point being, we want to make sure that this piece connects correctly to this piece as we come underneath. So I'm going to use this tool here called a notch, and on this first segment I've got here it's 12.9 centimeters, and on this one it's 12.9 as well. So I can add a notch at both of these points so that when I export this pattern, I know that these 2 points are going to line up. I can do the same on the back as well. So if I rotate this way and I look at the back panel, I can look here as well. So on the armhole here, I've got 13.8 centimeters, and on the arm here, the back sleeve I have as well. And this will be how the sleeve stitches in. Again, this will be the underarm point, and then we want to make sure that these 2 points line up when we sew this together. So let's add notches at these 2 points as well. I'm adding the notches because these black dots won't print out when we export the pattern, so we need to mark any specific points before we start to export this. Another point that we would want to mark is the shoulder point, because our shoulder line goes through our sleeve here, but it does not connect to the front seam of the shoulder because we've dropped this forward in order to see this seam from the front here. We can simply add a notch here, but it will be good for us to visualize the actual shoulder line on the pattern for when we make this. So I can draw this back in. This was our original shoulder point here, and this was the original shoulder point in the armhole. So we can add that line back in, and now we have a straight line coming down from the shoulder all the way to the wrist. So this is our finished shoulder line. And we have a notch here as well so that we know where to connect the sleeve into the shoulder point. Okay. So if we look now, the sleeve is prepared. We will look later at the cuff and the placket and everything. But for now, we can look at the front button stamp. So what we need to do is mark some buttonholes on here. Buttons and buttonholes. So the buttonholes will go on this side because it goes on top, and this is the underneath side which will have the buttons on it. So for now we can just add the buttons here, and then we can transfer the buttonholes over. So we can go to the button tool on the side, and we can add our first button in approximately 6 centimeters from the top. So when I have the button tool activated, if you look on the left, from left to right and up and down, I have a measurement from the edges of my pattern piece. So I want to place this right in the middle, about 6 centimeters down. So about here. That's the first button. And then the last one we want to place right at the bottom, about 12 centimeters from the bottom. So there's space for the garment to open about here. And then we want to have 5 buttons in total, so we need to add 3 more. And we can ask CLO to space this for us. So I'm just going to click and add 3. They're not lined up, they don't look correct. So if we go to the buttonhole tool over here, the select and move one. So not the add button here, but the one above it with the little mouse. Drag and select over all those buttons. Right click, choose align and center. And that will align them all by the center of the button. and then right and click and choose distribute and then do vertically. And it will give us a measurement of about 13 centimeters between each button. And now those buttons are lined up correctly. Because this is underneath, we can't see it. So if I just hide this front piece, I do Shift and Q to hide it. I can see my buttons are all placed down the front here. So if I press Shift and Q, I can bring that piece back. If we now want to just duplicate this as buttonholes, we can select these buttons, right click and click duplicate as buttonholes to symmetric pattern. And then on the symmetrical pattern piece, we will have the buttonholes. They are in fact going the wrong way. We want them to go up and down and not left and right. So I'm going to drag and select them and go to my property editor and change the angle to 90 degrees. So now my buttonholes go up and down. You can change the style, you can add, adjustments here, but in general, I want the bind position to be in the middle, which is where the button will rest. If I use this, I can change where the button will attach to, but I want to leave it where it is. And they go up and down, which is what we want for a shirt, so that's fine. I do actually want to just draw these in, because if they change or they don't get exported on my pattern, I still want to make sure they're visible. So I'm just going to use the internal rectangle and just draw in a buttonhole like this. And then if I go to my pattern select, this one, I can just copy this, Control C and Control V and just paste it. If you hold Shift, it will snap it to the same center point. C, Control V, Shift, and just duplicate these buttonholes as internal lines. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a second. So we want now to create an additional piece that sits on top of this front panel. So now our piece the front edge finishes about here. We can create a roll or like a fold in order to like finish the edge of this fabric, but we actually just want to stitch a piece on top so that we don't see the back side of the fabric. So I'm going to choose this front panel, right click and click layer clone over and just press Shift and drop this down here. And then I have now the buttonholes that I marked, but I don't actually have the actual buttonholes that Chloe's using to interact with the buttons. So now at least they're marked on both pattern pieces. So that's why I made them as internal shapes, because they didn't get copied when we made that copy. I'm going to click this line here and check actually the distance that we want to have our placket piece be. So I'm just gonna stop the symmetrical editing of these two pieces because they're gonna start to be different now. Like the left side will be constructed different to the right. So right click, remove linked editing, and then these guys are still linked, the ones that are laid on top of each other. And I want this to be about 3.2 centimeters from the front edge here. So right now, actually, internal line. If I look here, it's at 2.6. So I just want to jump this line out a little bit to about 3.2 right here. So I can take this line and just drop it out, and there we go. So this piece will now be the placket that gets stitched on the front. And I can delete this line I just used to create a measurement here. I can also just select my buttonholes or my internal lines and just move them over a bit so that they're now centered in the placket here. And do the same with the buttonholes. I can just select all of those at the same time and just drag them a little bit further over. I'm also going to press Control and C and copy all of those buttonholes and then just paste them onto this pattern piece here. And I can line this up with the lines that I made before, with the internal lines I made before. Okay. And then I'm going to remove the linked editing of these two pieces as well. And then I'm just going to cut down here and delete this extra front panel. So now I have this strip of fabric that's going to be stitched on top. So this will allow us to finish this front edge here, and then we will have a seam allowance extension that will finish on top here. And I can just stitch this down to the same panel here, like this. So we could simulate this after. Actually, we'll connect the buttons first. So now that I have buttons and buttonholes where I need them, I can close them. So the third buttonhole tool over here is the fasten button, and I'm just going to click this. And then I'm going to choose the button and where I want it to fasten. So I want this button to go through this hole, this one through here, and I'm choosing the placket so that they go through the top piece and not the panel underneath. And you'll see now that my buttons should have jumped to the surface. It looks like some of them have not. Let's just check that they are connected. Place this over here so it's easy to visualize. No, this is not connected. This button to this buttonhole, this one to here, this one to here. So yeah, now each button has a lock symbol next to it, and it's on top of the piece that has the buttonhole through it. So this is my button stand. My buttons are now connected, and I'll just actually solidify this. No. Strengthen and simulate. And I can remove the sewing from this front edge that we had in before. And now this is closed just by the button stand that we created. So this is good for the front side. For the front left side, let's say. The front right side, I'm just going to move this down here so I've got some more space. We want to create a fold here. So instead of creating a piece that goes on top, for the underneath side, we can just fold it. So I'll just hide this and I'll hide this. So again, this piece is the edge of our fabric now when we need an extension to roll underneath and then just top stitch through this point here. So the easiest way to create this, I think, is if I click this edge, right click and choose unfold. And then I choose this, the mirrored line. So this is my original, the folded edge. So I'm going to choose this one and cut to remove the excess. And then I've got my extension here. So I need to draw the center front edge in because this will be where we fold our fabric. And here I'm just going to add fold rendering and set the fold angle to 360. And then we want to look at simulating this, but this is going to get a bit messy with these pieces in the way. So let's turn these guys back on. We'll select the placket and the front piece, and we'll do deactivate pattern and sewing, just so that they're not going to get in the way, and then press Shift and Q to hide them. I will solidify this piece. No, I will strengthen this piece and simulate. So this piece is folded. Okay, yeah, we want it to fold the other way. I want to fold it to 0, not 360. Simulate. Yeah. So then if we get this to just fold under, oh, our buttons have gone wild. They're falling through the air because they've got nothing to attach to. Oh, look at that. We can deactivate buttons. Who knew? Let me just undo this for a second. So because our buttons have nothing to attach to, we should deactivate them. Just like this. Whoa. So that they don't fall to the ground. Right. Let's simulate this again and just try and fold this underneath. So we want to make a connection on the bottom and the top. So let's sew the bottom bit here from this side across on this side. And then we can just look at connecting this bit to this bit. So that will now fold all the way down this edge, I hope. Yeah. So now our front edge of this garment is folded underneath, and I can just stitch this neckline as well. So from here to here, and here all the way to there. And then I'm gonna strengthen this. And just let it relax, and then we will just have to reactivate the other pieces and these buttons. So now this is a nice folded edge. There's a little wrinkle in the bottom here. I'm going to press Control and A to select everything, and then Shift and Q to hide it all, and Shift and Q again will bring everything back. And then I'm going to select this front piece and this placket and choose Activate. And I think if I freeze this piece and then I activate it, yeah, my buttons have become active now as well. So because we've moved this around a little bit, I'm just going to select the front pieces and just move them slightly forward. Just so that when this simulates, it kind of goes back to where it needs to go back to. And press OK. So now our shirt is actually buttoned with a placket and a button stand and everything. And this is a lot more accurate to how we need it for the production. So I'm just going to choose unstrengthen on that and simulate it again. Okay. So this is our button stand is now fully constructed. We can look at some other sections. We can look at adding the buttons to the cuffs now as well. So for the cuff, we need to do a similar few steps actually. So we now have a pin that just shuts this cuff, which is fine. But we want to put on the, let's look at the other one. We want to put on this point here a button, and then at this point on top a buttonhole. So here we can just click and add a button, and then the buttonhole we can place it. If we click, like long click on this and then choose buttonhole, I can add a buttonhole at this point. But I don't want it to go here. I need to think strategically about how this gets placed. So choose your selection tool here for the buttons and buttonhole. Click it and just drag it so the start of the buttonhole is where the connection point needs to be. And this is where we look at the bind point. So you now want to move the bind point right here, which will move that little green dot, if it's visible, right there. And now let's delete this pin because we don't need it anymore. So yeah, the bind point is here. It was in the middle, but now it's here because that's where the button is going to pull open to when there's pressure on it. So we want to make sure the buttonhole goes this way so that this is the last point it can go to and not any further than that. And again, we can go here and close this button. So click the button, go to the buttonhole and just click. This button is actually pretty big and we might want to move it in a little bit. So if we want to change the buttons that we've got, I'm just going to go to my object browser over here, copy this button and make the width of it maybe 1.4 instead, rather than 2 centimeters, and just drag that button on there. And that looks a lot more shirt sized now. And we could even do the same for the front. So if I just drag and select those buttons, then copy the small, I can just name this like small and 2 cm. So if I ever want big ones, they're still in my object browser. And this looks a lot better. For the cuff, we have two options, let's say. We could add a fold on this edge here, or we could add a shape around the edge of the cuff. And what I quite like about this design is there's actually a shape around the edge of this cuff. So it's like it's not straight with a right angle, it goes round with a curve. So let's do the same on this pattern here, and then we will have two pattern pieces for the shirt placket, for the cuff part. So this is the pattern piece. We can copy these buttons to the symmetrical pattern, so select them, duplicate to symmetric pattern, and we should have buttons on both cuffs now, which we do. Then let's add, let's just cut away the corners of this, like here, and this, I'm not being the most accurate right now, but I think we can do this by eye. So I'm just going to cut that away. Those edges, delete, press C on the keyboard to bring up the curve tool, and then just curve this line, these corners out a bit. So we have a nice smooth curve on the edge of this pattern, rather than a right angle. And then we can add some top stitching to this. So on the cuff itself, we actually have, there's two lines of top stitching up here. There's one here and one right on the edge, one there on the edge. And then there's one about 5 millimeters in from the edge of the pattern, which kind of encases the seam allowance. So on the top, we want to select both these edges. Oh, don't move them. Right click, offset as internal line, two offsets with individual offsets, the first one being 0.2, the next one being about 0.6, I would say. And then extend them, and then you can visualize that already here, and then click OK. So now that's some top stitching on the top edge. And then we just want to add that as well to all those edges going around. Offset as internal line, one offset at about, again, 6 millimeters or 0.6 centimeters. Okay. And that give us the edge stitch on this as well. Let's just make sure that on the other cuff we delete those additional little pieces that we chopped away. And then we can make essentially the layer clones for these two pieces. So I'm just going to select both of them, layer clone, and go under. And then we should now have a cuff piece underneath as well. And now might be a good time to start looking at this in the thin mode, so I think just textured surface. And we can see the dark side is the back of the fabric and the colored side is the front of the fabric. So if I look here, my inside cuffs are actually showing the back side out. And I can fix that by right clicking on them and choosing flip normal. And that will flip my pattern pieces around so that I have the right side of the fabric facing in the right direction. Let's just unfreeze the cuffs, strengthen both those pieces, and just simulate it real quick. And then that's that cuff. And then we can do the same on the other one. I flipped this, I selected them both and flipped them together. So let's select those, unfreeze, solidify. Oh no, strengthen. I don't know how many times I'm going to do that today. Strengthen. And that's that cuff simulated as well. Next thing would be the placket. So I actually found an interesting tutorial that shows you how to construct this. So before I talked about cutting out this space and how that works when you have create the cuff on the back of the sleeve. So if you want to see how this is sewn, go to this website. I'll leave it in the link. I just found it in Google, and I think it explains quite well the steps that you need to actually stitch the cuff, and you'll understand why I make the pattern the way that I'm making it. So this could be quite useful if you really want to stitch this together in the end. So for the cuff, we have this top piece here. I actually might want to look at this one. Yes. So we have this piece here, which needs to be, again, folded so that we have a complete fold underneath. Right now we can see the back of this fabric here. So I'm just gonna layer clone this over. We can do this actually for both of them. Layer clone over. And this time we're gonna place it just on top, okay? Rather than under, we'll do over on this occasion. Then we want to take the bottom piece, because now it's the back of the fabric, because we can see the gray side, and we want to flip the normal on that so that we now see it the correct way around. And then we want to merge this edge out so this becomes a fold, and then this piece is basically folded around to create the finished edges for the sewing. So this is the edge we want to fold. So if I click this pattern piece here, I know it's that edge there. And if I choose this pattern piece here, I know it's this edge here. So it's these two edges we want to merge together. This blue dot shows where I click if you needed to, select a specific side of this. Select both of these edges, right click and choose merge, and they will join. Oh, wrong side. What's going on here? Let's just remove all the linked editing on this. That's that piece. That's the piece underneath. Choose these edges and choose merge. Why can't I merge them? Okay, I don't know what's changed here, but we'll look at this cuff on this side. So this is the top part. This is the bottom part. We flipped the normals, and then we want to just take this edge and this edge and turn them into a fold. So this one and this one, right click, choose merge. And then we want to draw that edge back in and set the fold angle to 0. Turn on the fold rendering. And then we can unfreeze and just see what's going to happen here. Yeah, that looks fine. So that is now a fully folded placket piece, and we actually need the same for this binding underneath. So we can do the same steps again. So I'm going to layer clone this over. I'm going to just hide this binding, flip the normal on this one so that they are all facing the same direction, like folding inwards. And then that outside edge needs to connect with this edge over here. So I'm going to remove the linked editing again, and I'm going to create a fold between these two edges here. So this one and this one. Again, it won't let me merge them. Why not? Okay, so it's actually because there's still more linked editing that I need to remove. That's why I can't merge this edge and this edge, because they're linked. So remove linked editing again, and then choose the edges and merge them together. And that outside edge here is now folded but kind of wrinkly. But if I draw that line back in, set the fold angle to 0, unfreeze that, turn on the fold rendering, and then just resimulate this piece. The binding is now duplicated as well. So now these are like literally folding around, which is how we want them for production. I can just check those pieces on this side as well very quickly. These two edges, merge, add the fold line, fold line angle to 0, unfreeze, and solidify. And then we will do the same for the binding as well. So these pieces are all now ready for production. The last thing we need to look at is the collar, and then look at adding in some seam allowances. So for the collar, if we look, this is actually set in the good way, like the right side of the fabric is here, which it should be. So like this is the back, which would be inside the garment. We just now want to duplicate the collar stand and the collar. So the collar stand is easiest. We can layer clone this under, and then right click and choose flip normal, unfreeze, and simulate. And now we have the collar stand inside our collar as well. And then the actual collar part, we want to do the same. So layer clone, and this time do over. Actually, no, do under, because we want it to go on the wrong side. And then right click and choose flip normal. And now we have the right side of the fabric facing in the right direction. And we can simulate. The thing that we want to change is the shape of this top collar part. So I'm going to remove the linked editing between these two pieces. And then I'm going to link these two. So if I apply linked editing, symmetric pattern with sewing, right. This one is now linked to this, and they do not affect the ones underneath it. And the reason I want to do this is I want this collar to be bigger than the one underneath it, but just a little bit. So if I take this point here and I bring it out and I add in maybe 6 or 7 millimeters in addition, that's going to help us sew this and make the collar sit in a much better way. So you add a few millimeters on the top corner here, and then on these pieces going into the back neck, we do the same. So just lift them up maybe 6 millimeters here, and just actually fix that curve here. I'm going to do edit curve point. See what's going on here. So now if I lay this one on top, actually, the center back. If I lay this on top, you can see that one piece is bigger than the other. So this is a little bit too far. Let's bring this back down a little bit. But you see there's a difference between the top piece and the under piece. So I'm just going to choose the top colors, strengthen, simulate, and they now will sit on a lot better. This will be obvious when you start to sew this together, but it just allows your top color to roll over and make sure your underside stays underneath. And it also allows you to hide these seam allowances underneath. So that's why we want to adjust those two. We can start to now remove all of the center back seams. So I don't want a seam here. I want to merge this together. Same for these two pieces. Same for the collars. The collar stands, actually, should I say. And then we can take out the center back seam in the shirt. I'm going to leave the seam in the yoke, and I'll show you why in a second. So our back panel is now one piece. Our front panel is constructed, and so is our placket. And our yoke is still disconnected, which is what we want. So to visualize this a little better, I'm going to add a stripe to this pattern. So I have a PNG graphic that I'm just going to drag and drop on top of this fabric here. And it is just a stripe. So now I can see the grain line of all these pattern pieces. If I do unstrengthen and unfreeze on everything, I can really see the direction that all the stripes are going to go in this shirt now. And I can see that on the pattern if I change this to texture surface over here. let's fix these grain lines because they're not correct. So to fix them, go to the edit pattern tool over here, the edit texture. Both the top colors and the undercolor and the color stands, we all want them to be this way. So just, I'm holding down shift and it'll snap it to a 90-degree angle. And now my color is going in the right direction. The same for the cuffs. Choose both of them, shift, and just turn this over. And it should be the same on the other cuffs as well. In general, most other things are correct except the yoke. We want the yoke, the grain direction to follow the shoulder line. So I'm just going to select the graphic, rotate it until I get a straight line down the shoulder seam. And the same on this one as well. So now I know that all my grain lines are going the right way. We can perfect this on the layout of the fabric. But before we lay it out, we need to have the seam allowances so that we know how close we can put these pieces together. So to add seam allowance, I'm just going to go, I'm actually turn this back to just monochrome so it's easier to look at. Go to the seam allowance tool over here and click it, drag select over everything, and you will have seam allowance applied to everything, but it's at 1 centimeter. And some things we want at 1 and some things we want to have more. So on a shirt, in general, we want some areas to be a French seam or a flat fill seam and some areas to be a regular construction. So the placket area of this, the front construction, the neck hole, the shoulder seam can all stay at 1 centimeter, but the side seam and the armhole and even the hem of this garment, so including the hem of this placket, we want to add an additional bit of seam allowance for us to have to be able to have more fabric for the way we want to construct the seams. So on the back as well, side seam, armhole, and hem. I'm just holding down shift to select everything, and then the bit of armhole on the yoke we want to select as well. And then the entire sleeve pattern we want to do as well. So like the top edge, just the top edge on the side, not actually the bottom edge. So this edge we can leave at 1 centimeter. We're going to change all of this to 1.5. So there's more fabric for us to work with. And in here, we can essentially select these edges, I believe, and turn off the seam allowance, but right now it doesn't matter. So we have 1.5 around the sleeve head, and then we have 1 at the cuff. So this part of the cuff that connects to the sleeve we can keep at 1, and then all the other edges of the cuff we actually want to change to being 0.5. So we have less fabric and less bulk in the construction of this. And that's been symmetrical as well. These guys we can leave 1 centimeter around them to again help with the construction. And the last place would be the collar. So the bit of the collar that goes into the neck we can leave at 1 centimeter, and then everything else we want to change to 0.5. So that would mean all of these need to be set to 0.5. Oh. 0.5 like this. And then on the collar stands, just the top edges. So this edge, like the pieces that connect into the collar, we want to also have set to 0.5. But the bit that goes into the neck hole, we want to have with 1. And again, if you sew this together, you understand why, but this will just reduce bulk in the way we construct the collar. And this looks now ready for us to start to lay out in the fabric. So let's go from the simulation space into the print layout space. If I look now, I choose this fabric and I can input a width of this fabric. So a standard fabric width would be, let's say, 140 centimeters. And we want each of these pieces to be printed 1 time, and we can now automatically like nest this into the pattern. So I'm just gonna save this before we start to nest anything. And what I mean by nest is lay all these patterns together. But you'll see now if I move these pieces on the front, I'll shift the graphic position. So it will help me lay this out actually in the design of the fabric. Like this is the image that I've input. And this will now allow me to really position this on the fabric. If I want to do this automatically, I think I can just click nest patterns up here, and it will do an efficiency for me to show me the best way to lay this out on a 140 centimeter wide fabric. However, I probably don't have the need to cut each of these things out one by one. I could do this like with a symmetrical layout. So I'll save this. This I could export right now, but I'll show you what I mean by the symmetrical layout. So if you want to save this, you can choose snapshot, and we have a few options of how this can be exported, but it's basically on the size of your document. So if this is set to A4, it will, and I do portrait, it will cut this whole layout into A4 pages. Basically, you see here, there's like a net of A4 pages laid out on top. And then it will give you a PDF document. If I click, these are all the lines that I want to have visible. I choose save. I go to the place where I want to save this, and I can create a PDF, a JPEG, or a PNG. And it will do one page per sheet. So if you want to print this out like page by page, that's possible as well. Or you can go one-to-one, and you can export this as a one-to-one layout and then print this on a continuous pattern paper. So like if you wanted this to be printed on something to cut directly with the fabric, you could print this large format and print this exactly to the right dimension. So this is 140 centimeters by 177 centimeters. So this garment will take 1.8 meters of fabric to be produced. What I mean by a symmetrical layout is if I just save a new version, we can go back to our simulation, and we only want to cut everything out one time basically. And because this panel is extended, I want to use this. I want to print this one out. I don't want to print this side out. So that means I cut two of these, I cut two of these, I cut two of these, two of these, two of these. Rather than cutting them separately, I can cut two at the same time because I'm folding my fabric over. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm just going to delete half of this garment. And you'll think that I've gone crazy, but you'll see what I mean. Then I can just cut the back down this line here and delete this panel. Right. The only difference I'm going to do here is call this cut 1 and call this fabric cut 2. So this is basically a pair of things that I'm going to cut out. And this is just a single piece. So the things that I want to be single are actually the two color pieces. They need to be in the cut 1 layout. And this color, the front placket here. The color stand I only need one of because I'm going to cut a pair of them. And then everything else I'm going to cut 2 times. So I need 2 of these, 2 of these. I need 2 outside cuffs, 2 inside cuffs, 2 sleeves, 2 everything else. So now if I go back into my print layout, and instead of having this set to 140, I half it to 70 because I folded my fabric in half, imagine. I can now lay this out on a fabric that is half the width. So it's giving me 2 layouts. So yes, now we can nest this again. And what we want to make sure is that our center back is actually down the edge of the fabric, so that it's not like hanging in the middle over here. It's right down the edge of the fabric, because that's where we're going to fold the fabric, and then we cut that out on the fold. So again, I'll see if there's an explanation of this online to share with you guys. Okay, so this is a good example. What I mean by the fold is, you see this fabric's folded over, and right on the edge she's placing the front edge of the garment, or the back edge, or whichever one you need, so that when you've cut the piece out, it is folded. I think here, yeah, you will have a fold down the middle, but you won't have a seam. So that's what I mean by cutting on the fold. I'll share this link with you guys. But now I can fold the edge of this fabric here. I can lay all my pieces on top, and this will take less time to cut out than if I need to cut every single piece out. And the same for this cut one. I can just re-nest this, and then I just need one top color, one undercolor, and one placket, and then I can save that as well. So now I would go here. If I want to print this out A4, I could set this to A4. It would give me this many pages, and then I would click save, and then that is how I can export this pattern from CLO3D, ready for sewing and production. So now you guys should understand seam allowances, folds, plackets, cuffs, and collars in order to be able to have the right extensions and seam allowances to make something for physical production. So I hope that helps you guys.